And it is time, one more time, to get solar powered. We welcome you back to the Solar Powered Podcast, celebrating the world changing magic of ordinary people telling extraordinary stories. I'm Ryan Hall from Royal Hearts Media. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I think we've got a fascinating guest here today. His name is Joey Natale. He is the founder of Grow Our Light, which is a coaching business dedicated to empowering nerds, geeks, and IT professionals to break through self-doubt, communication breakdowns, and just feeling disconnected. And um, and I think we got an interesting conversation here today, talking about connection and talking about a lot of people who work solo and can feel lonely and disconnected often. So let's go down to North Carolina and speak to my new friend Joey Natale. Joey, welcome to the Solar Flower Podcast, my friend.
Hello, and thank you for having me, Ryan. Appreciate
Yes,
you.
pleasure is all mine. Well, let's first start with the question that I love asking new guests. Who is Joey? What is your story?
My story. My story began in Greenville, North Carolina, when I grew up there with my family, then moved to the Raleigh area for high school, then went to Asheville, North Carolina. So the east, the central, the west. So I lived in North Carolina all my life and bought a house about 2 years ago now. So now I'm kind of, home base for me. And my story began kind of my path into coaching and the mental health and world was I remember when I was asked, like many people in high school, is what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do when you grow up? Which is one of the worst questions you can ever ask a young person, in my opinion. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. And it wasn't until I was 18, my senior year, and I walked into my first psychology class. And I just had this moment where I was like, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do the rest of my life. I didn't know what at that time, but that was it. I only was under the impression that therapy was the only route with psychology or psychiatry. Didn't want to get a doctorate. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll be a therapist. So I went to school, studied health and wellness and psychology, mind and body, and then got accepted into graduate school. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I mostly for debt reasons, and it was some various things like a part-time program, and just didn't feel right. And I would have to stay in the same town I was in after college for a while, and I wanted something new. So I went into IT instead. I turned to hobby, being a lover of tech and nerddom and fandom of all kinds, and I hated it. I hated it so much. I didn't know why I hated it. What I know now is it wasn't aligned with my values, what I believed and what I want to do in the world. So it wasn't until the apocalypse of 2020 when I attended my first Tony Robbins event. And there was this, I had these thoughts that I kept kind of pushing away because I didn't know what to do with them. Like, when are we going to move toward what we want to do in our lives? And at this event, Tony Robbins said, like, you ever had that feeling when you want to do something more in your life? I was like, yes. Yes, I do. That sounds familiar. He's like, that's a feeling, a call you're getting to step into something greater in your life. I was like, oh my. So if you ignore that feeling, you essentially commit spiritual suicide. And you'll wake up in 20 and 30 years and you're later in your life and be like, what the hell have I done with my life? I'm like, oh God, that resonates with me so hard. And then I discovered this thing called coaching. I was like, what is that? And it was more my speed, more my flavor, and it lit me up. So that's when the journey began, and I've been doing it ever since.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, the an analogy I love to use, and I love Robin's analogy on that. Just
Yeah.
like if you wake up in 20 to 30 years and just ask yourself, just what have I been doing with my life?
Yeah.
Because I feel like so often we have dreams that, just to totally butcher the Langston Hughes phrase, we have dreams that we have deferred for so long because we feel like we have to put them in mothballs almost because of obligations with
Yeah.
family, kids, and jobs and all that good stuff. But
Yeah.
you're also living a life of, as you said, just of spiritual suicide. And that definitely resonates with me, just
Mhm.
as somebody who is still pushing for his dreams, pushing for his pushing for his goals. Like,
Mhm.
same dreams that I might have had when I was 20 years old, now that I'm almost 48.
Mhm. Yeah, very true. We always will be pushing for our dreams and goals. Sometimes we get to live the dream, but what comes to mind when you say that is just like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And how do you know you're there? So I've certainly met a lot of people who they reach it and they like on to the next mountain, on to the next challenge, and they don't stop to celebrate and be present, which is a whole nother conversation in general, which is like I see a lot of people, not just nine to fivers, but entrepreneurs who like never really take the time to like enjoy the fruits of their labor too. You know what I mean? Especially after you take big strides towards your goals and dreams, right? That's an unhealthy way to, to get there too, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's like you may accomplish your goals, you may accomplish your dreams, but you're going to be absolutely miserable in doing so.
Yes, yes. One of my mentors, when I was first started coaching, I was just like, well, I would just want to get there faster. And I'm just eager and urgent to get there, which can be a good thing, could be a good fuel. But she said to me, like, be careful, because if you start your business that way and grow it that way, you have to sustain it that way. And if that's not sustainable for you, you will get burned out. I was like, oh, that resonates with me. Right. So making sure it flows and I say the word ecological comes to mind of like, is it sustainable in all areas of life? You know?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
that's what
hear
comes
that.
to mind.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Now, I like to rewind just a little bit
Sure,
because
totally.
as a certified coach myself, I
Hmm.
am definitely kind of aware of some of the differences. Like I've always learned it, and I've also been somebody who's been in therapy for years.
Yeah.
Therapy is definitely more of dealing with the past,
Yes.
and coaching is definitely more of like creating the future. And I'm curious, what sort of I know you said you kind of felt yourself a little bit more drawn towards the coaching space. Was there
Yes.
anything specific? Was there anything that really stood out to you, like tangible, that made you just say, this is the route that I want to take? I don't want to be a therapist. I want to work as a coach.
Absolutely. Um, One thing was there was kind of initially, I would call it barrier to entry. So like there was, well, I guess a better way to say that is it more aligned with what I know that I didn't know back then was my values. And one of my values is freedom and autonomy. Uh, I think therapy is amazing. I think they're amazing therapists, and I love that it's grown as it has today and is certainly less stigmatized than it is today. And I know that in some fields and some disciplines, there is more red tape. There is some people they can't help as much or do some of the things they want to do. I feel like coaching kind of pairs nicely with that, complements it in a lot of ways because there are some ways that coaching can support that therapy can't. Just like there are some things therapy can do that coaching can't necessarily do as well, of course. So what specifically resonated with me is one of like, oh, I don't have to like get into major debt, which was a big one for me, being freshly out of undergraduate school. And it was also the time factor for me. So I had got accepted into a master's program. I was going to do the social work route. And it was a 3-year program. So it was part-time versus full-time. And that's 3 years. And then is like in North Carolina, it's like 2,000, 3,000 hours to get licensed. So that's 2 or 3 years roughly. That's like a 5, 6 year track of like starting one's own practice. And that felt like a long time for me. Now, what if you had told me that it may or may not take that long to grow a business? I don't know if I would have done it, probably, because entrepreneurship has made me face my fears, insecurities, and doubts and being seen and being heard, which is a wonderful surprise. But coaching felt more, going back to what I said, really more flexible, more freeing, more modalities. Like I don't have to have a barrier to entry to sign up for this program or that program kind of thing. I can start doing it now. And it turned out I've already been doing it most of my life. One of my mentors, who was my professor in college, they said, therapist, everybody's messed up. Therapists and psychologists and coaches just want to know why. And, one of my mentors have always said, just like, psychologists, and I would also say coaches, it's just like they've been doing it all their life. They now just turn that into a job. And that has been very true for me. I've always been curious about people, right? So, so yeah, really that's what comes to mind. One of the major ones, freedom, flexibility, like I've said a few times already. And then it's just a thrill. It seemed like more adventure, kind of an unknown path, if you will. And that really lit me up. And I didn't know how much that would resonate me until I stepped into it. Right.
Yeah. Now that last piece definitely lands for me, because I find that, so much of coaching, so much of that space is
Mhm.
just co-creating an unknown future.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have, most people have goals, most people have big dreams,
Mhm.
but most people are kind of blind to the obstacles, the inevitable obstacles that come up.
Yes. Yes.
And that is what's always kind of lit me up in this space, is just kind of going through this together. It's almost like jazz music in a way. You've got a
Mhm.
goal, like you've got like an end goal of the sound that you want to create out of a particular song.
Yeah.
You may not know how to get there. And
Yes.
that's what I feel like a powerful coach can really bring to a conversation and bring to that kind of relationship.
It makes me think of something Alan Watts once said. I'm going to butcher the quote, but he was just like, children are, especially I think of like 100 years ago and the type of like play sets children had, and they were by today's standards we would call dangerous. Anyway, and children just play on them and have a good time, right? And they're walking on top of the monkey bars or something kind, and they're having a wonderful time, and the parents are like, "Oh my gosh." And it's this fine line of just like, I don't know if danger is the right word, but risk and joy. And that's where truly being alive is. And so to kind of add to your previous question is like, what else drew me to it is like, yes, the focusing on forward, right? Versus just focusing on the past, which we need to do and nurture and understand and reflect. But when you focus on the future, every level there's going to be another devil, right? There's going to be another boss. The next level we get to challenge and overcome. So I always like to say is like a good coach can do therapeutic style and coaching, and a good therapist can do both, past and future kind of thing. So the focusing on forward, and it felt more growth focus versus just like, I don't want to say, because that would be unfair to say like you just kind of spiral and focusing on the past, although some people do that. But as a coach, you can be like, hey,
There
we're
you
not going to
go.
do
Yeah.
this. Yeah, we're not going to focus on that today. Let me pull you out of it, kind of thing. And I know good therapists can do that too. But yeah, I just want to add that too. That's what came to mind.
Yeah, a good therapist, yeah, a good therapist can certainly pull you out of that spiral, even though,
Yes.
yeah, it kind of sounds like the relationship that I have with my own therapist, which I will not get into in this conversation.
Fair enough.
But yeah, just the long story short is sometimes I'll fight like hell with him, but know that he's right for, helping me pull out of that spiral that
Yes,
really feels comfortable in certain cases.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one thing in our initial conversation, one thing I found fascinating about you is just the space in which you work, specifically with like IT and kind of in that techie kind of space.
Yes. Yes.
And it's something that I can certainly relate to in kind of in my author career, because a lot of the work that I do in writing is by myself, lonely, nobody to really kind of interact with.
Yes.
And I get that there's a lot of that in your world as well, of just like somebody like grinding away inside of an IT closet and trying to like designate a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that, for sure. Even high level, I would say it's now as expanded. I was just listening to a podcast actually, with Vanessa Fun Edwards. Great content. Highly recommend her work. Um,
Love her books, by the
love
way.
her
I'm
books.
definitely
Yeah.
a fan. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it was a more recent podcast, and she was asked the question of like, in your 18 years of work, what have you kind of noticed socially? And I love what she said is AirPods are killing our connections. And I was like, wow, yeah. And she said, I'm forgetting the term she used, but something like weak connections. Like in her before 18 years ago, before she doing her work when she was younger and single, before she was married, like you go to the gym, for example, nobody had Walkmans, earpods, and like you'd be kind of weird. Now you're weird if you don't have them. And that's where kind of micro interactions happen. Hey, do you go to that gym thing? Like you see them out and about, like, oh yeah, I do. Oh, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Things like that. Smaller connections like that. And that's where actually really it evolves into deeper connections, right? So now we have people who are, IT spaces where it is kind of lonely work, and definitely being a entrepreneur, solopreneur is you're just kind of, I mean, here I'm at the house mostly, kind of just doing my work, doing my thing. And I love the freedom, not having to go to office. And also there's a loneliness piece there, having the autonomy, the going out. And so there is, a lot of people have coined the term a loneliness epidemic, rising, especially in younger generations. But it affects everybody, honestly. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of things where I've noticed some skills in younger generations. Like I've spoken to Gen Z clients, and they're like, the skills that were taught naturally, because I'm a millennial, are kind of atrophying in some ways. And what's beautiful is they can be taught, right? It's not biologically wired like we can't speak, but they're less experienced and less exposure to it. This especially goes into like dating and all sorts of things like that. Not just men, but also women too, kind of things. I could speak more on that, but that's what just came to mind when you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that piece about the AirPods are kind of
Yeah.
killing our, just kind of killing our connection with people.
Yeah.
I have a pair in my pocket all the time, every time
Yes.
I leave the house.
Yeah.
And there's kind of some freedom behind that of being able to pop in, take a phone call, listen to a ball game or listen
Absolutely.
or whatever. But at the same time, is like when you're going through, let's say at the grocery store, right? When
Yeah.
you're going through the grocery store and somebody's got an AirPods as the cashier is checking them out, you're
Yes.
missing an opportunity to make a little talk with them, you know
Yes.
talk about whatever. And that's definitely starting to atrophy is a great word for that. It's
Mhm.
really starting to atrophy in a lot of spaces out there.
I agree. Absolutely. I see it a lot. And so, for me, it's always a chance to just connect with people and practice social skills. Practicing, not like pickup lines, but just practicing connection lines, I'd like to call them,
Yeah.
connecting with friends and things like that. It's really a joy to me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting because like I feel like we're kind of missing a little bit of that kind of authentic connection piece. Like even maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but even in like networking groups, when we go to and I'm a member of a networking group,
Mhm.
and we go to these meetings and we give our little 30-second sound bite about who we are and how we can connect with each other. But you're really missing that opportunity sometimes of becoming friends with people, becoming that,
Yes.
missing that opportunity of having that person be able to endorse you and, recommend you to other people for their services. Like I have gotten, and I used to be really bad about this, of just like going in, keeping my head down and not bothering anybody. But as you get out of your shell, and
Hmm.
you meaning me, of course, as I get out of my shell,
Hmm.
I start to I start to develop relationships with people who, can be more than just like inviting me to their house for a cookout. It can be,
Yes.
you know, like business opportunities. So yeah, love for you to maybe speak on that piece a little bit.
Yeah, what comes to mind is just like I'm gonna borrow Vanessa Whenever's work again, just because it's so relevant to this part of the conversation. Where like what comes to mind is like using kind of her framework is it's like three levels of friends. There's obviously more, but for the sake of this conversation, level one is they know what you do and what your name is. Level two is people who know your goals. They could tell you what you're working on, like either your biggest dream or your goals. Level three is your dialogue with yourself. These are people who know the story you tell yourselves, right? It's really deep kind of thing. And, that could be broken up into a lot of things like my life is awful, everything keeps terribly happening to me, or like I'm a hero, I've overcome a lot of things, or like I'm a healer, I'm here to help the world. There's a lot of other modalities out there, but those are just a few. And so when you want to level up to them, so let's talk about the first one, level one. That's where most people are like surface level friends. They're past kind of acquaintances, maybe a little more, it depends, but they're not strangers, right? So if you want to go above that, one of the questions I always teach people is like, don't ask people what they do. Please, dear God, do not say that anymore. Please remove that from your vocabulary. What do you do is the most boring question you can ask because everybody asks it. And as a result, people go on autopilot and then they're not going to be engaged, right? So ask him like, what are you working on right now? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? Even a simpler question is just like, what do you do with your time? I like that question because it gives them the ability to talk about work or personal, because some people aren't defined by their work. So when you ask them what they do, they don't maybe not like it. And if they do, they'll tell you, right? So, that's how you graduate, if you will, to the next level. And you might find more commonalities and connections. People like people who like them, right? So being very curious about the other person, they're going to like you more. There's this great book that comes to mind is How to Talk to Anybody. 92 Ways to Talk to Anybody. We can put it in the show notes. And there was a story in that that really resonates that comes to mind is the author was with one of her friends at a networking event. And she talks to her friend saying, oh, who did you enjoy talking to? Let's just say the person's Tom. She says, oh, I had a wonderful time talking to Tom. I'm like, oh, the author says, what does Tom do? And her friend said, I don't know. Okay. The author said, well, where's Tom from? And her friend was like, well, I don't know, actually. We didn't talk about that. And the author says, well, what do you know about Tom? Or what did you talk about with Tom? And she said, well, we talked about me the whole time. Just very curious kind of thing. Right. Obviously, there's the dance and communication to go back and forth like that. But yeah, no, I can speak more, but I want to pause and just see
Sure. Yeah. No,
thoughts.
no. You what comes up for me when you're speaking about that is just the idea of being curious, because
Yes.
I feel like, and social media can be like detrimental to a lot of this stuff, but like we don't really know each other anymore. We don't
Right.
really know what makes each other tick anymore.
Right.
Like, I may live in Connecticut, but I'm definitely Southern. Like my heart is definitely in a little cul-de-sac in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much of the connection piece down south, and I'm sure you can speak to this as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
but so much of the connection piece down south is meeting your neighbors, going to your neighbors, for a cookout, or
Yes.
having a beer, having a cup of coffee with somebody, and just getting to know people, getting
Yes.
to know what makes them tick. Like,
Mhm.
just for example, like a former neighbor of mine who I really grew up with, and I was well into my adulthood before I realized this, was that in a previous life, he used to be a prison guard out in California.
Hmm.
And one of the notable prisoners that he guarded was a charismatic young serial killer named Charles Manson.
Whoa.
So, like, right when his story was like at the height of like pop culture back,
Mhm.
back 50 years ago.
Mhm.
So, but it's like you don't really know. And, another piece is like, a friend of mine, she's a previous podcast guest. Her name is Rachel.
Mhm.
And she wrote an incredible book called, um, you know, and she she spoke about in this book about like getting deeper with people.
Yes.
And Relentless Joy is the name of her title of her book. I can't believe I
Mm.
blanked on that. But but she tells a story in there about a trip that she made to Israel one time.
Mhm.
And it was like I think it was like a church trip that they went on, just like touring the Holy Lands.
Yeah.
And they were at this little plaza,
Mhm.
and this older gentleman walks up and started engaging them in conversation. And it turns out that this guy actually survived um a concentration camp, and told like just heart-wrenching but riveting stories about that.
Mm.
But you never know what somebody's true story is until you get deep with them.
That's true. What comes to mind about that is a great question. Speaking back to the three levels of connection, friendship is like, how do you move from second to third? Well, a great question. There's many, but a great question to do that is, you ask someone, which TV character or movie character do you identify your life story as? Not who your favorite is, but who do you most identify with in your current life story, right? The answers will surprise you, right?
And it just kind of blew my mind. Can I share mine? I'm just
Please
like
go ahead.
just
Absolutely.
Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown.
I've always related to him kind of on
Yeah.
a like a spiritual level almost.
Yeah.
And my dearly departed Pete was a white dog, solid white dog, just like Snoopy.
Yeah.
And when I grew up, I kind of saw myself as just like this quiet loner.
Yeah.
But in reality, as I look back on it as a grown up, I see just how much like people just like fed off of the things that I said and off the things that I wrote,
Hmm.
and that I just couldn't see it at the time.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating question.
It is. It's a good one. Absolutely. That's a good one. Use it. Use it wisely.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I'm sure this will go as a short on the YouTube video. That's definitely that's
That's a
definitely
good one. Yeah,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
definitely
So,
good. Yeah.
um, it blew my mind just as much when I heard it as well. And, you know, when you have that information about how someone identifies with their character or that character, it realizes like how they see themselves. It's their worldview, their world map, right? Somebody might be very successful and might be doing a lot of things, but in the inside they may not, right?
Mhm.
You might identify with someone who's like a survivor in their life. They don't have as much freedom, or they might view themselves as a hero, even though things may not be going as well for them. It depends. So, when you kind of go back to where IT professionals are alone and kind of the connection piece of conversation is like having deeper connection versus many. This is something I've been working on in my own life. A great mentor of mine said, it's at least in entrepreneurship and the coaching profession, it's better have a mile deep and an inch wide of relationships versus a mile wide and an inch deep. Many friends and shallow relationships versus deep, meaningful relationships, nurturing ones, right? And that also goes into a higher conversation of like feeling purpose and connected, feeling belonging, if you will, using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And I think that they say today we're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. I'd say we're drowning in, I don't know, friend requests, if you will, but starving for deep, meaningful connections. That's kind of the work I want to help people get to, right?
I love that. I love that. Yeah, no, we're definitely drowning for depth and,
Yes.
in our relationships. And, just speaking as a fellow introvert here, I feel like a lot of times, like one of my biggest blocks when I was really starting to like get into the whole coaching space and trying
Hmm.
to build a business was like, I feel like I have to, like at the time now, I felt like I had to become somebody different. I felt like I had to become like somebody that I didn't think I really wanted to be or really needed to be.
Absolutely.
But I'm reminded, and I'd love to hear your take on this, that I'm reminded of a piece of advice that my dad gave me many, many years ago. My dad, for most of my listeners know, but my dad was, he's passed, but he was a professional musician at one point and also pretty successful in the restaurant and the bar business
Hmm.
when I was a kid. And his advice was simple. You just have to see and you have to be seen. You have to be willing to connect with people, willing to shake hands, willing to have conversations with people, because the kind of people who are successful in really kind of any entrepreneurial space have to be able to make those kind of connections.
Yes. Yes. What comes to mind when you share that is like, I'm thinking of, what was his name? Dave Chappelle, of all people, was talking
Okay.
about, I think it was a jazz artist, blues artist of some kind. I cannot remember who that artist was. He said, in the beginning of your career, you're trying to be like your heroes, but in later in your career, you're trying to get away from that as much as possible and be yourself. And you're like fighting to just stand out as yourself alone. And what comes to mind about that is kind of like, I think we talked about the Golden Buddha story. Did we talk about that? Did I share that with
I
you?
don't think so. No,
Oh,
I don't
I'll share
believe so.
this
Yeah.
brief
Talk
little
to me.
story real quick.
Talk to
I
me.
love
Yeah.
this because when I started reading self-development and studying it when I was 18, and later got into coaching, of course. And I remember hearing from some, powerful figures like, "Oh, you're not broken. You're already amazing as is. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be better." And I had this question of like, then why do we work on ourselves? What's the point? And it wasn't until I heard this story that really resonated with me. It helped me to find my answer to that. The Golden Buddha story is very simple. There was this monk, if you will, just meditating next to a giant golden Buddha statue near a monastery of some kind or in a village. And then one of the villagers like, oh, we must prepare. The neighboring violent village is coming to ransack our place and take over. We must protect the golden Buddha. And they're like, yes, you're right. So they did. So they covered it in mud and sticks, and they covered the giant Buddha statue. And they did. The neighbors came over and took over, and I guess drew out the people, ran them out of town. And then time passed, many years. And there was a guy just hanging out next to this giant mountain, and a chunk fell off and hit him in the head. And he was like, "What the heck is that?" And then he turned around and oh, there's gold. There's gold underneath this mountain. So they said he gathered all his friends and pulled off all the mud, the rock, the solidified dirt, and thus the golden Buddha was restored. So what does this mean? The story implies that you are already amazing as is. Your light is already shine bright. And as we go through life, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, the, you know, childhood traumas or traumas we experience or societal norms that don't align with us are the mud and the scars we receive. And the inner work is not trying to make us better, but really just pulling it off and letting our inner light shine brighter. So the goal is not to be better, but you shine your inner light that was always there to begin with. Right.
It gave me chills. That's just such a beautiful analogy. And it
Mm.
just reminds me of a line from one of my favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire songs. And I'm not going to sing it. I'm not going to get this deplatformed or anything like that.
Mhm.
But the line is, in your heart lies all the answers to the truth you can't run from. It's from a song called Mighty Mighty.
Mm.
And I feel like so many people, we kind of use our like traumas and, our perceived brokenness
Mhm.
as almost like an excuse to keep from pushing forward.
An
Lord,
identity.
Lord knows I've done it. Yes,
Yeah.
almost an
Same.
identity, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like we use that as almost like an excuse to keep from moving forward. But in the same time, we're put on this, just regardless of what kind of spiritual belief you have, we're put on this we're put on this earth for a reason. We're put
Mm.
on this earth with a gift to give the world.
Mm.
Let it shine. Find your voice. Tell your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You've heard the expression, if you want to have something you never had before, you need to become something you've never been before. And by being it first, you start to do it. Being, doing, having. A lot of people get that twisted, especially in our society, is like, well, I must do it first to have it. Not so. Connecting with what you want and things like that. And you know, earlier point you said about becoming something you didn't want to be. And, when, because I've expressed this point to some clients who are like, well, I don't want to be anybody else. I'm like, well, you can't. Good luck trying. You're gonna fail at it because you can only be yourself. You can pretend, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
You tell
And
him.
it's good to get outside your comfort zone and try new things and you realize that it doesn't resonate with me. Right? But becoming something you've never been for, using the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell, what comes to mind is like, the hero cycle. You get the call, you go on the adventure, you overcome the dragons, if you will, and you then have a death, rebirth kind of cycle, kind of thing. And the death and rebirth cycle comes about like the ego, identity, death to old limiting beliefs and identities that do not support you anymore, that are actually like weights or anchors that are holding you back. So people use them as an excuse, because it's easy. It's easy. And some people aren't aware. And what you're unaware of is running your life, right?
Mhm.
So, some people aren't ready, some people don't want to. And that's your choice. You get to. But if you want to have that thing, is it getting in the way? Right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Just to kind of touch back on my analogy, um, I guess I often thought that to be the kind of entrepreneur that I want to be, that I would have to become like bigger than life almost.
Yes. Absolutely.
But
I've
I'm
been
not
there.
that guy. That's not who I am. I'm
Yeah.
definitely, my, an old coaching mentor of mine once said that my presence is like a warm fireplace and like a ski lodge, and not so much like a roaring inferno in a forest.
I love that.
And that has always landed for me. And it's like like a joke that I have made before. It's like I don't have to become Tony Robbins. I can just be Tony Hall's son.
Yes.
And because that's not who I am. Tony Robbins, that's, it's a different kind of a different stratosphere. But
Right. Right.
when it comes to just identity is just such a great word here. When it comes
Yes.
to kind of people finding their identity, finding their own voice,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you feel like are in the way, especially with some of the men and women that you work with?
The stories you tell themselves. That's the summarized answer, right? Do you tell yourself that I am lonely and will never have friends? Maybe they don't consciously, but sometimes they feel that way. I've been there. Heck yeah. Absolutely. I don't know how to connect. I don't know what to do. And an interesting point on that, I'll say, and I'll get back to answering your question, is especially more so nowadays, past 5 years, 10 years, I'd say. This has been more true. Kind of like the AirPod thing, I'll say. I'll speak more into depth about that. Is people nowadays, let's say they're in a relationship, they get out of a relationship, or they're in a job and now they have also have more freedom and they were focusing on being at home. Like, I want to make friends or go date. What a lot of people fall into is like, I need to learn how to do that. I need to level up and grind those skills, if you will, before I can get out there and do that. That's not true. Children are great examples of this. They suck at making friends and they do it anyway. Most, not all, of course. They'll get out there, they're bad at it, and then they just like, hi, my name is so and so. Do you want to play? And then they do, right? It's the same thing for adults of all age. It's not that you need to level up your skill, it's that you need to learn how to withstand the social awkwardness because it's always going to be there. The social awkwardness happens at first, dealing with the presence of uncomfortableness. I'm like, I'm at the networking event, I'm in this meetup group, I don't know anyone here. Ah, right? And then you start talking to somebody and like, okay, this is good. They might make you feel more welcome because they've been there a while, maybe they have friends. And then you get into another conversation. You're like, cool. And then you see the another person that comes into the event and they're feeling that like deer in headlights look. And you might, hey, come on over, right? So getting past that and practicing that as a skill and a muscle. So going back to the stories that people say all the time, it's just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do, kind of thing. Yes, there are skills and techniques to be more effective at it. But the main thing is just getting out there and facing the fear and doing it anyway and doing it badly, right? With reason. Let's not talk about extremes, but you know what I mean.
We're not talking about getting drinks thrown in your face. We're talking about,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah,
That's very different,
yeah.
of course. Um, but I do see a lot of that kind of thing. I need to get ready for it, kind of thing. I haven't done it in a while. I'm too afraid to do it. I don't have time. I don't make time. All the stories you hear, kind of thing. And their inner dialogue and in beliefs of like, oh, I'm not good enough to have friends. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not, charismatic enough. I'm not enough. Insert whatever it is. Same concept, just a little more in depth, right? Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
comes up.
yeah, totally, totally. And what I'm reminded of is anybody who's great at something, be it writing, be it, music, be it sports, be it whatever,
Mhm.
there's always a little spark that that gets ignited
Yes,
at one point in their life.
yes.
But do you want to put in the work to become that great thing? Like, I guarantee you, Jimi Hendrix did not just pick up the guitar when he was a kid and
Hmm.
started playing Foxy Lady. He had to work at it. He had to grow into that.
Yes, absolutely.
Same thing with same thing with a great, with a great writer.
Yes.
I can't tell you how bad some of my early stuff was, but I work at it. I got better at it. And, now I think I'm pretty good at it. So
Yeah,
we're talking about practice here. That's
pretty
it.
much.
Yeah.
And practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanence. So if you practice it not the best, you might get better at not doing it best kind of thing. Makes me think of the analogy of the master has failed more times than the student has ever tried.
Yes.
So true, right? And, we then lead into the conversation of like confidence, self-esteem type of thing, and self-worth. I'd like to share a little something about how I kind of distinguish the two if you're open to it.
Go right ahead.
I had a good friend who shared this concept with me. It's super great. So I was sharing the wisdom on this. It's like I like to view kind of like a house. Self-worth is the foundation of the house, right? Foundation needs to be strong. The house is the confidence itself. And then self-esteem is the evaluation of the house. Which one fluctuates the most?
Really good question.
Self-esteem,
Really good question. Yeah.
evaluation of
And
the
no
house, just
doubt.
like
Yeah.
housing prices do. Typically, they go up and down with the market, right? Now, yeah, sure, a tree can fall on your house and it could damage your confidence, but not always the case. Usually, I've had a lot of clients who come to me, I'm just like, I've lost my confidence. Like, I've been there. I thought I had that too. But confidence is one of those things where it's a muscle. Studies have shown that, like, using a workout example, I don't know, let's say you could, I don't know, squat 500 pounds or something at one time. That was the peak of your leg fitness. And then you just stop working out for an entire year. And now you can only do 300. Is it going to take you a year to get back to do that? No. It's actually going to take you like roughly half the time if you were consistent. The same is true for mental muscles like confidence and social skills, right? If you were confident at one time and you had a skill and you choose not to do it, atrophy it, you will, it's going to take you half the time to get back on the saddle to do it. It's work to do it consistently, right? So going back to what I was saying is self-esteem when you get it like rejected, job loss, or he or she rejects you romantically or things like that. Your self-esteem will take a hit. It does. It doesn't feel good, right? And really traumatic events might shake your confidence, like the tree analogy falling on it. Usually it's self-esteem first, but confidence, yeah, it can happen. But what does that really mean? It's actually showing you that there's cracks in your foundation. That's where you get to do the inner work, your self-worth. Because when your foundation is strong, using the house analogy, you can build a taller, it doesn't have to be taller, it just could be stronger house that can withstand more trees using this analogy, and it will not buckle as often, right? So that's room for getting a therapist, a coach, and looking into like, what are these cracks? How can I mend them, if you will? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really powerful analogy because it is so true.
Mm.
You know, it is not a linear thing.
Mm.
Yes, that foundation is going to, like, if the foundation is there
Mhm.
and it's solid,
Mhm.
you can withstand the trees falling on the house. You can withstand whatever
Yeah.
and bounce back from it. But
Yes.
if that foundation isn't there, you know, a windstorm that blows a few shingles off might just totally wreck you for a month.
Yes. Absolutely.
But if you think about it, one of my favorite analogies is that if a MLB hitter hits 350 every year constantly for 15, 20 years,
Hmm.
he's in the Hall of Fame. But you're also failing over 60% of the time to get a hit.
Hmm.
But when you do succeed, that's what winds up on Sports Center. That's what winds up in the highlight film, and that can also get you a plaque in Cooperstown, New York. So
Yeah. Yeah.
failing is just a way to learn.
True. Absolutely. You are praised in public for the things you practiced in private.
Bingo,
Mhm.
bingo. I think one final question I wanted to ask you is that what, like, in your experience, when people come to you for support, for coaching,
Mhm.
what is one, like, do you see like any like patterns or anything like that of like specific things that people come to you for, specific things that people need support with, especially in that whole like data-driven IT kind of world?
Absolutely. Yeah. Loneliness is a big one. It doesn't have to be romantic loneliness, but that shows up a lot too. But like loneliness and lack of connection, disconnection, those kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. Maybe they're really good at the job, but they want something more fulfillment wise. They're not maybe exactly sure how to put that into words sometimes, but they know there's something more. So finding either romantic, personal friend connections or just professional connections, and they all go hand in hand. I also see a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt, right? Something I can definitely speak to.
Same.
Um, yeah, people who are who do work on their inner selves, and they may have a past of not being good enough story, which I know a lot of people do. Sometimes if they believe that story strong enough, it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy and they will have more failures, more than character building ones. And they'll see like, see, this is why my life sucks. Or on the flip side, if they have more successes and they're like, I don't deserve this promotion, this raise, like, what is happening? What can actually happen is they can deepen the self or imposter syndrome, right? Again, updating it. So it's kind of flip coin, but still kind of the root, can be the root, same issue. And then communication. Communication is a really big one. Communication is one of those skills that everybody does, but doesn't know in order to exceed in life, romantic relationships, business, be effective at it. It's this, I'm going to use this quote from Warren Buffett where he said, like, more so related to speaking, is like speaking is one of those skills where if you didn't learn it, you may not know you're missing out on it until 50 years later that you didn't use it. Kind of like investing, if you will. It's kind of, that's his whole lens. And effective communication is really where going to be, you're going to get over, you will get raises more. You will get more dates. You will get over those hiccups in your romantic fights or friendships. But understand the world better and understand yourself better. Because, there's an expression I'll share to encapsulate that is like, watch your thoughts because they turn into your words. Watch your words, they turn into your actions. Watch your actions, they turn into your habits. Watch your habits, they turn into your lifestyle. And watch your lifestyle turn into your destiny. So how you think affects how you speak and how you act, right? Starts with thinking, of course, but your words tell you what you're thinking unknowingly. And when you open your mouth, you tell the world who you are.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful place to leave. Joey Natale, thank you so much for joining us here today. How can
Absolutely.
people find you? How can people work with you? And what's next for you?
Absolutely. So the best ways to get in contact with me is go to my website at growourlights.com. We'll have the link in the show notes. Just shoot me an email or send me a contact thing from there. Book a call with me. Let's have a conversation. What am I working on next? Getting more speaking engagements, being on more podcasts, looking for more opportunities for that. In-person stages is the thing I have the least experience in. It scares me the most, and I know that's where the growth is. That's where I'm going.
There you go. Been a treat. You've been an absolute treat. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. And that'll do it for this episode of Solar Powered Podcast, a presentation of Royal Hearts Media. For more information about me, go to my website at royalheartsmedia.com. You can visit me on the social media machine at Ryan Hall Writes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm now on Substack. I'll include a link to how to subscribe to that in the show notes below. But that'll do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Ryan Hall saying thanks for listening. So long for now, and go get solar power. Take care.